Good morning. A very special morning. And even though I've heard about and read about and experienced Russell for years, we actually met this morning, just now, for the first time. I was traveling last time that he was here. And so I'm so happy to be able to be part of this. Um, and Katerina, do you want to introduce?
Yes, yes. So this is part two with Russell Delman, and we have a breakout room where you can choose either to go to the breakout room at 9 o'clock New York time or to stay in the big room. Russell Delman was a friend and focusing partner with Eugene Gendlin for many years. We're so grateful how he helped with Eugene's last years. And Russell Delman has been training Feldenkrais teachers since 1984. He trained with Moshé Feldenkrais. So he developed then the Embodied Life. And over to you, Russell. Thank you.
Thank you, Katerina. Well, thank you all for being here. And I so enjoy just connecting with people interested in growing their inner life and helping others to grow their connection to life. So this is a gift for me to be with you. So some of you were here in the first meeting, and I'm guessing some might have seen the video, and I'm also thinking that some are probably new. So for all of us, I'd like us to feel connected and be able to spend much of the time interacting together with your comments and questions and sharing. So I'd like to kind of briefly go over what I think of as maybe the most important or possibly important views I was bringing last time. And then whatever you would like to look at together, I would enjoy. So let's just take a moment so that we're not just in our heads and kind of getting here and taking in all the faces and maybe close our eyes for a moment, and if that feels okay for you, and just drop down and feel the fundamental reality that you're sitting. Most likely, if you're not sitting, however you are, connected to the earth right now. You're supported by the greater body at this moment. It's literally true. You're not floating just in space. You're supported by the great body of the earth. And that's not theoretical only. It's your feet are touching something and you can feel that. Your bottom is in contact with a surface, probably a chair, and that is connected to the earth, supported from deep in the earth. Gravity is pulling you towards the earth. There's this basic attraction of smaller bodies to greater bodies. It's a kind of love, really, that we're attracted to each other. And you can feel the surface that you're on. And without effort, breath is coming and going. And just with a little movement of attention, you can sense you're sitting and also sense that there's a movement of air. And is it true that you can sense both of those really effortlessly, just by opening your attention to the ground and to breath. And so I'm going to talk a little bit, and I encourage you, maybe if it feels right, to just stay with your eyes closed, let the words come through you, around you, and see what touches you. So here we are, grounded in the physical body. And I'm suggesting that this has great, great, great value for our awakening, for our beingness. That grounding in your physical body is not only a step toward felt sensing, but is actually in itself a return home. And in this return, we can take some moments to let go of our storyline of who we think we are. So it's a real shift of consciousness. Say, I'm here. There's here-ness. There's breath. There's ground. There's sound. There's a voice coming. And before you're a man or a woman, before you're a focuser or a therapist or a person with a disease or a certain age or dealing with something, before all of that, you're here. And there's breathing. And there's some way in which you notice that. Without effort, actually. You're awake, you're here. And then immediately the story comes about who you think you are and how you are in your life, which is very important. But it's kind of like the clothing on top of your naked body. So I place a lot of emphasis on just this. Here. Jean liked the phrase, the eye without content. Here. The light is on. Before good and bad, right and wrong, happy, sad, what am I going to do with my life? Before everything, there's here. There's being. And from this space, we can value the historic self-identity, what you need to do with your life, what you want to do with your life, what's calling you. And this awareness can take care of all the voices, all the feelings, all the sensations. And focusing is a delightful way, an important way of connecting the I without content and everything that appears within that space. And the last thing I'm suggesting is that the I without content is not there for the function of working with your life. It's there for itself also. It becomes a larger sense of self-identity that includes everything from your past and future and storylines But maybe it's possible that ordinary people like us can get confident enough in this ground of being, this light of awareness, that it's never far away or rarely far away. And we have that home, just as our body is at home, carried by the earth, and the breath comes. But there's a different context for the coming and going of everyday life. So just take a moment, letting that in, not for agreement or disagreement, but maybe wondering, is there something in what's being mentioned that feels of value or important or confusing or just wrong? Anything. What goes on within oneself as they consider? How is this? Is this of value? How would it be for me, for my clients, for my friends, for my life? And then let the thoughts go in the background. Notice how we have that incredible human capacity to shift attention. Say, okay, all of this is living in me. I'm going to stop focusing on it and feel my right foot. Wow, I can do that. My left foot. The body is tangible enough that we can really go there. Your bottom on your seat has weight, and you can know it right now. Your right hand is touching something. Your left hand, there's some temperature sensations within it, around it. Maybe more on the outside than the inside. And the breath comes and goes. Good. And just notice how any of this is living in you. Confusing, exciting, interesting, boring. and then slowly, as it feels right, let your eyes open if they're closed right now. And so that's where I'd like to just start us. And maybe there are some comments or observations or questions or sharing that would like to occur. And if not much is happening, I'll continue doing something. So it's all open, and I'm curious. I'm also curious, as I mentioned in something I wrote to you, for those who who attended the previous meeting or saw the videos, if there's anything living forward from all that, I'd be curious also to hear about that. And one last thing is, I'm very comfortable with silence, and I encourage us all to just enjoy sitting here, as something will happen. I guarantee it. Moments will come.
I would like to share that it's not a morning for me, it's like afternoon. So I've been delighted to have this moment of your encouraging us to stay whether now in the body, and in a kind of different way than normally, I was able to notice my wanting to go somewhere, to do somewhere, to go somewhere, to escape, to follow, to withdraw, to whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the difference is, but it feels like something very fresh in the moment, like a new noticing of something that I already knew, but you know.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Gosia. Would you like a comment on that? Is that
Of course.
okay? Yeah, so that's wonderful to notice that and to notice it freshly. And what I've noticed in my journey with myself and others is there is such a strong longing within us to be present and awake. We know we've all had the moments of deep connection, of intimacy with ourselves, with another, with nature, with beauty, with a breath, with something that we know our deepest satisfaction comes in presence, and almost as strong as our longing for presence is our longing for absence. And it's really important that we know that it's not something wrong with us, it's not a kind of a glitch in the system, but there is a very, very deep, I would say, fear of being present that lives within human beings. And for me, it was important, it has been important to recognize that and to kind of take care of the part of me that just doesn't want to be here. I mean, in the extreme, I think there's a part of us that wants to die. I really do. Not in the sense that we're all suicidal, but in a, I don't know, maybe even more fundamental sense that living is hard somehow, and at the extreme, we all know that there's dissociating, there is suicide, there are ways that people really do absent in a much more complete way, but that's just us at an extreme. I think for us to get friendly with our absencing, and the beautiful way you expressed it, a fresh sense, if I'm hearing it correctly anyway, I may be going in a direction that's not right, I don't know. But there's something about being able to smile with our absencing, even celebrate. I mean, sometimes I love sports. I did sports as a kid, and I still love sports. And I'll just sometimes just love to read the sports pages and follow the stories of characters, and it's one of my ways of just kind of going out. You know, my wife and I we have precious, tender moments, and sometimes we'll just want to sit and watch TV and have a glass of wine, and there are moments of presence in all that, but there's also a kind of letting go of everything. And yeah, so that's what comes to me when I listen to you. How does that land with you, Gosia?
Like very intimate, like really discovering the moments of newness, and then you naming it. It felt like kind of embracing them. So,
yeah.
And I'm also like taking in what you said, and there is a mixture of all of that. So, thank you.
Good. Yeah, and I'm going to say one more thing, and then we'll go on. Is what I've noticed is paradoxical. Is there's a real need to let go of mindfulness or attention in order to be awakened. That it's not our efforts that gets us. Our efforts are needed at a certain level, but then there's a letting go of all of that. That it's actually when in my Zen tradition, when Dogen Zenji, who was a famous Zen master, talked about, to paraphrase, enlightenment and delusion are one. Enlightenment needs delusion. We appear out of the darkness. So we have to get rid of this idea of, it's extremely paradoxical, because we have to get rid of the idea that I'm, through my efforts of paying attention and listening to my felt sense and meditating like this, that I'm going to come awake. Let go of that idea, and yet we have to do all that stuff because that really helps it occur. But then at a certain time, it's letting go of all of that and letting it appear, letting it come, letting it arise. And we all, I think we know that in our focusing journeys, that there is a kind of letting go into, but there's still the sense, I think, that we think we're doing it. And we are, but we aren't. And that's a very confusing message I'm giving right now, but I needed to say that. Let's go on. Someone have something they'd like to bring.
I just loved your attunement, Russell. That issue about how we have to work at being present or healing the world or being ourselves. And the work is just preparing to let go. It's a very strange thing.
Yeah, well put.
I always loved when Jean would say, it has to come, like tears come or laughter comes. But I guess maybe you have to think of something funny and then let the laughter come. I don't know.
Yeah. There's this fantastic and really mysterious interaction between what we could call light and dark, or knowing and not knowing, or intention and non-intention. And it's part of my quarrel at times with the word mindfulness. And it's mindfulness teachings are so wonderful and essential and important. And I'm just meeting so many people who are interfering with their awakening through mindfulness, through the efforts to watch their mind. And just the word itself, I mean, unless you go more like a Tibetan version where mind is mind-heart. It's not thinking, it's mind-heart. It's one thing. So unless we have that, we're falling into the Western delusion that it's in our minds that we're going to figure this life out. And so the word itself is a trap. Yeah, something.
I just wanted to share with all these contrasts that something I don't really understand. When I feel very present with someone, I don't let it happen often, but when I allow it to happen, tears come to my eyes. And there's a way that I have embarrassment about that rather than acceptance. I
Oh,
wanted to share that.
yeah.
Came up for me.
That's touching. That's touching.
Just wanted to share. I can't articulate the why or the what, but there was something about your attunement that was experienced in my body, mind, heart, spirit as incredibly profound and allowing. I'm in a place personally where I actually missed your last one because I was sitting Shiva. So I'm experiencing grief and a combination of that and some kind of complex PTSD because of the war that has been going on where I live and how it's bringing up all kinds of things from my past. So it's all this mess. But just as I sat and listened to your voice and your words, and I wish I could articulate what it was about it, which I can't, but I felt just this allowing, which felt so welcome. And I realized that for a time I had no thought. The mindfulness, the mindful was like an apple, like when you delete something and you get the poof. It was so I feel very grateful. So
Thank you. Thank you.
And I just want to say, I was a patient of Randy Cherner's back in the 90s before I moved here. And he mentioned you, and I've wanted to meet you. So
that's wonderful. Well, Randy is a best friend, and we've had almost 50 years relationship, and so he lives deeply in my heart. Thank you for bringing him into this meeting.
Yeah, very special person. So thank you.
I'm wondering if a person who is suicidal could experience being as present as you led us to be, whether it's like it was so precious, or it was so wholesome that you could not leave the possibility of being there. Like, I can't imagine wanting to kill myself if I knew that there was this place that I could be whole. Yeah.
Oh,
It's confusing, probably, but
say it again.
I said that was a bit confusing, probably.
No, it was very touching for me to have this, to go with you into this picture of a human being. I've been with human beings who have felt that there is no hope, and that not being, which is, by the way, a very, very, when I was talking about absencing, the Buddhist term for that is not being. And, Buddha would talk about the two strongest urges. What I talked about in terms of to be present or to be absent, he called being or not, and not being. And being and not being really call us. And that's not really, it's very difficult to, I don't want to say it that way. I want to say it's a very powerful subject to work with in our inner world. And which is why remembering death is an important part of my practice. Every day, I am both remembering my temporariness, but also that my daughter will die. I hope after me, but I intentionally bring forth, usually at the end of my meditation in the morning, the reality of that occurrence, that it's not a surprise, that it's not, I mean, it's a surprise when it happens, but it's not a surprise that it happens. So, so here we're picturing a person who is at that edge, which is a very powerful edge, frightening edge, potent edge, that, as you're saying, includes, implicitly includes that sense of hopelessness and that sense of, I would say, disconnection. So if such a being in such a moment could feel a connection to something, and yet, you know, in that moment, it's actually very close to moments of awakening in meditation, can be, where the veil is quite thin at those moments. And if it can be, and it's, of course, in the situation you're describing, it's very difficult, and I have no idea of kind of structuring a way of doing it. But there is something about, I'd say it brings me back to something that Ruth was saying. There is something about connecting, deep connecting, that the word we use a lot in Zen is intimacy. Intimacy with the moment. Intimacy with something. And if that person could experience intimacy, means something gets through that thin veil, and there is a coming together, and one is no longer alone. And as I'm forgetting who said, I think maybe Dorothy, I'm not sure. There are tears that maybe want to come in such a moment. And I think if we can welcome those tears when they're even slightly appropriate, that's so helpful. And I think helps others feel the intimacy of such a moment. I think it's a gift. And yeah, it is funny that funny, that's not the word, it is ironic maybe that in moments of being touched, in moments of deep intimacy, whether it's with a flower or in the forest or a person or a sunset or a music or a breath, the tears and the laughter can be very close. Thank you, Mary. Yeah.
I'd like to. So, Dorothy, other than Meg speaking, I think I call those, I think if I've experienced the same thing, I've always called those tears of movement. And what always surprises me is they come before I have any idea of why. And I don't mean a deep why, I just mean a nanoparticle of why, which I find that. And because I used to write jokes. And when I was writing good jokes, I'd be sitting in my room just thinking of jokes, writing, typing, blah, blah, blah. And I would start laughing. And a nanosecond later, the understanding, the grasping of the joke, but I would laugh before my mind had any freaking idea of what the joke was coming. In fact, I knew if I did that, it was a really good joke. And I think eureka moments, if you're banging your head against the wall to solve some problem, that burst of light, I think many people actually literally see in the mind's eye, viscerally, a flash of light before the solution. And what deep volcano? Who's in there doing that? But it's certainly always a deep alignment. It's like a lot of the gears have come together and go click, 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 and the tears of movement, like Dorothy, or the laugh before the joke, all come together, but a huge alignment. Thank you for letting me say that.
Thank you.
Could you compare consciousness with mindfulness?
Consciousness, for me, the way I would think of that is a much larger field. Mindfulness is a instance of consciousness. Consciousness exists. Consciousness predates mindfulness. Consciousness is more like the air, and mindfulness is more like a particular current in the air, a particular wind in the air. That consciousness is kind of the stuff we're using to be mindful with. Does that get there at all?
That helps. Thank you.
Yeah. And I really wonder if this picture that I'm bringing, and this might be something that we'll have more time with in the larger group, in the main room. If this picture that we all healthy egos have cultivated self-identities. You know if you're a man or a woman. You know if you're an American or from China or from Israel or from some other place. You know what your profession. We have all the makeup of our life. You know your age. You know what you've been through. You know, so we have this storyline of what we think of ourselves. And for the great majority of people, that's who they think they are. And a lot of therapy is about getting a better story, getting a story that's less painful, getting a story that is more life-giving, that has more potentials in it. I would like to suggest, as important and valuable as that is, I don't want to understate it, but I want to say it's like something, I'll give you an image, something like you're living in this big room, and the room's a real mess. And one of the great things about inner work is to get that room in really beautiful order, and get some nice furniture that's right for your life now and not what you were given from your parents, and put beautiful things on the walls that appeal to you, and organize your room. But no matter how well you organize your room, you're still in the room. And there's something about being able to step outside the room and know that you're living in this beautiful environment. That no matter how good you get the room, it's only going to be as good as you can get the room. And we want that because we're going to go back to the room, we're going to hang out in the room. But boy, if the room is where you think you ought to live, it's way too small for human beings. And that's why anxiety is appropriate for a human being trying to live in the room.
So it's a both and of noticing the space and working on the room, not ignoring that there's stuff in the room as well. Yeah.
Yes.
And I wonder if you say more about that.
Yeah. Well, that's what's so wonderful about groups or people, or in my little way, my embodied life teachings. That's so wonderful when people value both, when people have experience, intimate, consistent enough of the larger space, of I without content, and deeply value the emotions, thoughts, feelings, stories of our personal life history. That we recognize we each have a different gift to bring, and to cultivate that gift, and to find out that, well, to cultivate the gift, I also have to step out of who I think I am, which is paradoxical. But I think I might have mentioned last time, I have, what do I want to call it? I get so disappointed or upset with many of the non-dual teachers who really undervalue individual experience, ordinary everyday life, relationship. And most of the ones I know don't have great relationships because they've sacrificed that for the sense of being one with all. Well, oneness is an error. It's incomplete. Duality is an error. It's incomplete. To honor oneness and duality is closer to reality in my perspective. So unless you just want to say, well, oneness includes duality, well, then you have to honor duality. Duality meaning that you are different than me and we can meet. You see, without implicit in oneness is a lack of relationship. Oneness can't have relationship to itself. In some of the ancient traditions, some of the theistic, Kabbalistic kind of traditions say, well, God needed to create the many, so there could be some relationship there. Otherwise, it's all one thing. One thing can't have relationship. It needs other. We need other. And out of other, but if you live in other, eventually you're going to feel disconnected from life. So the dance between oneness and duality, between we are all interwoven together and we are separate and that's the dance of life, that if we can get somehow more developed, mature, capable of working in that dance, of honoring our individuality as we also let go of it completely and really enjoy the oneness of us all, and then enjoy the separateness of us, and let that dance occur. If we spend too long in one side of that, this is a great metaphor for relationship, for intimate relationship. When people don't separate enough, they've merged, and merged beings don't get creative. Or as creative as possible. They get secure but not creative. And if they have too much space, it becomes distance. And they can be individual, but they lose their intimacy. And that dance is so central to satisfying living and creativity. And so I think that's a fundamental, at least for me, fundamental way of looking at this dance of life. What do you think, Abby?
It's beautiful. And to follow up on that is like how seriously to take our thoughts and stories, right?
Yeah. Seriously and lightly. Again, it's paradox all the way down, you know? There's a certain, I really love being a father, and I love that part of my relationship with my daughter. But when I think I'm a father in some deep way, my voice changes, my atmosphere changes, and she gets pissed off. But yet she loves being a daughter and loves me being, but we also like letting all that go, being friends, being this, being that. I teach her sometimes, I'll be a student with her sometimes. We do all these dances, right? But there's some fundamental memory of a more essentialness than that relationship. And I'm not sure if that analogy works for you, if I'm getting across. I love my role as a teacher. Right now, I'm kind of being a guide, a teacher a little bit, trying to get across some ideas. But if I start thinking I'm a teacher and you're a student, and that's the only way we live, it's going to get all confused because I'm going to start needing you to be less smart than me. And that's a big problem with therapy. If the therapist sees the patient as a patient, then they've got to be a patient. So we need to be able to see with some humor the vastness of each of us, the multitude of each of us, the potentials of each of us, and then take our role seriously, but also really be committed to letting go of who we think we are. Letting go of those self-identities when we get really good signs when we know we're getting attached to a self-identity. And anxieties begin to appear. I have to be a certain way. I have to look a certain way. And when that's controlling, we know, okay, I'm becoming less of who I know I'm myself to be. Maybe there's nothing I can do about it right now because for this time, I don't see my larger capacities. But part of the function of a good meditation practice, in my point of view, is to grow enough connection and confidence with the pathways to the larger space that it's easier to let go of these temporary constructed selves that we have. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Abby.
I love
Has her hand up. And Ula.
Good morning.
Hi.
Hi. You spoke about the dichotomy of security and creativity. And I wonder if you could speak some more about that. That really struck me.
Yeah, okay.
I've always thought I needed to feel secure.
Yeah. So it's a great question because again, we have to unpack it. Security is essential for the human nervous system, for human beings. Secure enough. Enough is a really important word. What I mean by that is there is no security. We're dying. Everyone we love's dying. There really is no security here. And we need secure enough to be our best selves, to bring our gifts into the world, knowing that this planet's dying and will die and is temporary and we are temporary and all of that. How do we passionately and seriously bring our gifts into the world? So we need to be secure enough. What happens, and we see this at systems at all levels, so whether you're talking about governments or personal relationships, when security becomes the most important thing, potentiality gets limited. So we saw this, I mean, you know, the old example I like to use, old now, meaning it's probably, 20, 30 years old, is before the Soviet Union was broken up, it was much more secure in terms of crime, et cetera, but very little potentials for the individuals to manifest themselves in the world. When it first broke up, potential exploded. But with it, a much less security on a social level, much more crime, much more, because you could do anything now. So then the impulse, if it gets too open like that, is, let's create more boundaries. Let's create more security. And in the security, we'll give up our freedom, but we have to give it up in order to feel safe enough. So then the question is, how much freedom can you stand? How much For most intimate relationships, if there's too much freedom, it becomes distance. There needs to be boundaries to most intimate relationship for there to be the true potential of those individuals. But those boundaries need to be moving and challenged and worked with, because if it gets too secure, too much, then there will be a loss of creativity. So, secure enough, and that's a constantly changing enoughness. I don't know if that's helpful, Ruth, but that's where.
Yes, it's very helpful. I have to see how I can bring that into not just much more about my relationship to myself.
Yeah. So right there is really wonderful to notice. I would say what I was pointing at before, that we really listen for the signs of, I am living in an old story. I know it's an old story because it really doesn't feel like me anymore. It's like, there's certain clothing in your closet that you just wear and but it's really not right anymore, but it's there, and or maybe you haven't even taken it out in a while, but it's like that. It's like, okay, when I get a sign that I have to be seen this way, or I have to see myself this way, I begin to question. And those questions, there's an edge there. It's not easy to let go of important self-identities. So I don't throw them out, but I really question, is this true that this is how I have to be in this relationship? And maybe I'm not ready to change it yet, but I want to live on that edge to see. You get what I mean?
Yeah. It is definitely an edge, and the letting go of identities, even if they're negative, maybe especially when they're negative. No, I'm not a person who can do that. I'm not a right, or I'm not a this, I'm not a that.
Right.
But there's something that wants to be written or said or done. And
and that
tension.
Yeah. And that's where that beautiful, beautiful phrase from Jean, what's a small step in the right direction?
Right. Yes.
Just a tiny, tiny step in the direction of something that feels blocked, but it's calling, but it's too scary to enter. And it is too scary to go far in that direction, but a teeny bit in that direction begins to shift something.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to ask something here also. In that paradox of working hard to, in mindfulness or other practices, to enter the larger, is that, and when you say, ultimately you don't do it, but somehow it happens, do you call that a state of grace?
Yeah, I love the word grace. Yes, grace is there, and grace happens, and our efforts are not separate. Our efforts can contribute to kind of cultivating the soil, to, it's gardening, and you can't make the plant grow, but you can create conditions where it might be more likely. And then you're surprised that your neighbor hasn't done anything and they've got beautiful plants. And you go, how did that happen? Well, we each have a different path.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. My question was related to what Ruth and you spoke about. But I get I'm struggling a lot of being at the edge of being myself and longing for a larger space and just be one with everything. And I'm in relationship with people. I try to. I don't feel so afraid of take a leap or say something, try something, throw out a joke or so. But I'm looking for the special invitation on that edge. When, where, how do act, not a reaction, but act, and how to discern small step, but how could I discern when it could be fruitful for our relationship, the person I have engaged with right now or not? So I'm very much, I'm working in an existential tradition, so I'm very familiar with being and not being. And but I think, could you say something about give me some leading about what signs is, when should I invite to a dance and when should I step back? And I want to be in that very impossible question to discern the small things there. So I wonder if you just say something which comes to you about this.
Thank you. So the word that comes to me is, which I'm not sure is going to be helpful, but I will say it, is the importance of vulnerability for that kind of connection. And how to discern a moment where that's going to be helpful in the interaction. My sense and my encouragement is to lean toward vulnerability, lean toward not knowing and communicating from not knowing. And what does that look like? It looks like I'm not sure. I'm modeling in it for a moment. I'm not sure if this is helpful to say, but I just want to say it, and something comes out. That we don't know, and we communicate from the don't know. And there's something that is very opening when someone is present and willing to share that kind of step. I don't know if this is helpful, and
it is helpful. And when I've done that things in friendship and so on, and the other person, and I also be vulnerable, I think, not only, but also, and the other person or a few of them get very confused and take it personal and misinterpret, and sometimes they are grateful, and it's like a bump in them. And I don't know to handle that, what I sense as a bomb, because I didn't want to mess it up. And I don't think I messed it up, but I don't know how I could go on with that. I don't want to be a therapist with them. And I don't want to draw back. And I
got it. Yeah, so that's clear. So what comes in a moment like this, and I don't know if you would relate with this, is there's something about humor in such a moment that really is kind of the we're standing on two legs: vulnerability and the willingness to kind of, whoa, I guess I really blew it this time, or whoa, maybe I shouldn't have said that, right? Or, oh boy, why did I ever say that? Or whatever that somehow diffuses the bomb.
Yep. That's very helpful. That's very helpful for me, because it has taken such strength for me just to dare to say these very serious words.
Right.
So I haven't have access to my humor in that situations.
Mm-hmm.
I will think of that next time I try to balance on the edge.
Yeah, really great practice. One of the signs that you're not too lost in the identities of the moment is the ability to see it, and that brings some kind of humor, that brings some kind of irony, some kinds of often about myself in such a moment.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Russell.
Yeah.
Very helpful. Thank you.
So, Charles.
Thanks so much, Russell.
Yeah.
Thanks for this whole discussion. I just want to add a couple of thoughts around this issue of security. One thing I learned from an exercise from Ann Weiser Cornell, which was to go out of our comfort zone, but just enough, as you say. Too much, we're going to get overwhelmed. It's going to scare us. It's not going to help. But if we just toe in the water, kind of. Oh, yeah, me move a little out of this comfort zone because that's how I'm going to grow. That's one thing I had to say. The other is this is a YouTube that I saw with Gene, where somebody asked him, well, we're never secure in this world, as you point out. And Gene said, yeah, you're right. That's true. And there's an inner security that we can find. There's a place inside where we can find some kind of security. And he said every morning I do that. I find that also good to remind myself that yes, there is an inside place where I can find some security. And it's not about what is it they're saying about happiness or joy is the happiness that doesn't depend on circumstance, something like that. It's something that comes inside, and that we can ground ourselves in. I find that a useful bit of a distinction there.
Yeah.
Thanks.
My hand, but I don't know. All the right gesture there. I love what we're talking about and where it's going. And I was thinking of the term, the psychoanalytic term, courting surprise and being open to surprise. But I was thinking that it isn't only surprise that is a nice thing, but it's also being open to collision. Before, Russell, when you were leading us and you were helping us to see the difference between the room that we're in and the bigger, and you said a couple of times, well, if you're a man or a woman. And there was something that clutched inside because I'm close with someone who is struggling with being trans and in a society where you have to be a man or a woman, and often with indecision about, I don't know if I'm a man or a woman, or I'm both a man and a woman. And I was imagining if someone in this group said, well, I don't know if I'm a man or a woman, there might be this feeling of a collision, a surprise, but then to be open to that collision of, oh my God, I didn't make the room big enough. And there's all these things in the world that aren't in my world or aren't in my room. And some of them sort of take me by surprise, not just by surprise, but take me aback. And I said, oh my goodness, I didn't even think about that. And there's something in what you're saying, Russell, that gives me something about being open to even the struggle and the discord and the not only insecurity, but the feeling of fighting for your reality inside, and then taking that lightly, saying, oh, yes, of course.
Yeah. Thank you, Lynn. The power of valuing our what I like to call temporary identities, deeply valuing the struggle at times, and knowing that that's not who I am. And getting that secure enough, we could say, or confident enough that we can be in the fray of, well, how am I supposed to be a man in the world? How am I supposed to be a woman in the world? How am I supposed to be someone who's not sure if I'm a man or a woman? How do I live that to be able to engage in that dynamic question and to know that I am much larger than that question gives me the security to go deeper into the question. And yeah. And actually, I did have something from Charles's comment, which was, for me, that how do we find the place inside that is secure? Well, for me, that has to include, and yeah, that's a little too extreme. For me, it includes a friendliness with death. That I actually can't imagine a true inner security that hasn't somehow gotten somewhat friendly with the fact of dying. And that's part of why I think impermanence is so central to Buddha's teaching. Victor.
Since you were talked about being with someone and being myself, that produced a train of thought. And I realized that like 90+% of the time, being with others, I'm basically being in my projections. I'm not really with the other. I'm with myself. But here comes the moment when I recognize. Suddenly, I realize that there is another. This person is something that possibly not me, and that's actually that opens to the possibility of intimacy and discovery, and possibly a step towards the bigger me or truer me, maybe. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. It's beautiful.
Hi. So I'm having this experience of not being in a breakout room and knowing it's not going to happen. And I realize it's such a familiar experience of not expecting something and it not happening and not getting what I want. And I just wanted to share that all with you. Instead of jumping up and down because it didn't work, instead of jumping up and down just to jump up and down, to share how I thought this was going to happen and I wanted this to happen and it didn't happen, and how familiar that is, and how much characteristic of my life this is. It's an essential theme in my story. And I'd like to have a story with the essential theme is getting what I want. Unless getting what I want is getting this experience of not getting what I want and appreciating it.
Wow. Okay.
I also wanted to say one other thing, because Ulastina brought up non-being, you brought up non-being, and I've never experienced non-being. I've experienced gaps in remembering where I was, went to sleep last night, and for part of it, I don't know where I was, but I think I was somewhere. I've never really experienced non-being. So I'd like somebody here who's experienced non-being to explain it to me. Thank you.
I loved your unless. Do you remember?
No. Oh, that unless, yes. No, but I don't remember. I just remember that there was one. Yeah.
Well, it was something like, unless my...
getting what I want was the experience of not getting what I want in this particular way.
I don't remember if you said accepting or celebrating or something like that.
It's the experience of not accepting it and accepting my not accepting that I'm accepting.
Yeah, there's something really wise in that for me. That's known inside, it seems to me. I was going to say I would love to hear the poem that I offered and then take just a minute or two to speak to it or from it before we end. And if that's okay for people. Dorothy?
Good to me. And I'm hoping there's going to be a part 3 about telling new stories. Okay. This one, it's a Rumi poem. This one, you suppose that you are that trouble. You suppose that you are the trouble, but you really are the cure. You suppose that you are the lock in the door, but you really are the key that opens it. It's too bad you want to be someone else. You don't see your own face, your own beauty. Yet, no one's face is more beautiful than yours.
So I just want to take a minute with this. As some of you know, I use a lot of, I find poems really evocative of felt senses, and I use them a lot in my teachings. In fact, for those who might be interested, in January, I have a 4-week class on meditation using poetry as an entry point, which you can find on my website. But let's take a moment with, you suppose you are the trouble, but you really are the cure. How many of us carry that, and certainly our clients? You suppose you are the lock in the door, right? But you really are the key that opens it. Isn't that what inner wisdom is? Isn't that the shift we're talking about? It's too bad you want to be someone else. Right? We all have that picture of, oh, if I could only be my ideal self. It's too bad you want to be someone else. You don't see your own face, your own beauty. But there is no face more beautiful than yours. It's a slightly different translation. And this is, for me, a beautiful instance of shifting self-identity from this face, which is not more beautiful, less beautiful, it's a face, to my original face, to the true face. And if we can shift to that, then we don't worry so much about, gee, I'm kind of losing my beauty, or I used to be beautiful, or I've never been beautiful, or I'm not beautiful enough, or why don't people see my beauty, or that right? Which, of course, we can extend that to anything. That people don't see how smart I am, or I'm so stupid, or whatever it is. But when we shift to the I without content, to awareness as a real, true sense of who I am, there is no face more beautiful than yours. Of course, it's not more beautiful than anyone else's face, but there's no face more beautiful than yours. You suppose. I love that. I love that. Any last minutes before we wrap up? Again, very grateful, Lynn, for your creating this forum, Katerina for inviting me, and for all of you for bringing your presence here. It's a gift, and I wish you all well on your unique and precious journey, and maybe we meet again.
Well, your presence has been a wonderful gift for us for Thanksgiving, and I'm very grateful for you being here. And I hope you do come back for part 3.
Great. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Russell.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Russell.